It seems that as of late, no matter what Nintendo does, a huge angry mob will be there to shit on them, which is fair at times, but not a lot of it is. It seems like a lot of people have been complaining at them for the sake of complaining at them, cause that's what the cool kids do apparently. I won't defend them with their horrible ethics. Their emulators are horrible, their online service isn't enough for the price, they have left many of their games to be forgotten, and more. With all the shit that's been thrown Nintendo's way, it seems people forgot the other side of the industry. Sony has been around for as long as Nintendo has been making games, and their retro gallery is nearly as impactful. With the PS3 being officially a retro console, and reports of a new retro service incoming, and the PS3 store's end approaching, I think it will be a good idea to look at our current state of official emulation and retro retribution. Games like Castlevania Requiem and Kingdom Hearts don't count, as they are full ports. However, games like Ape Escape 2, Parappa the Rapper 2, and Code Veronica are fully emulated. Visually, it's average. It doesn't do a proper job at smoothing out textures, causing them to have a lot of wavery lines, and you can see dithering colors clearly. These games were from a time in which people were still using CRT TVs, and therefore a lot of their visuals depend on effects only those TVs had. Most of you probably have seen the Twitter post about Symphony of the Night, how Dracula's eyes have a much more ominous glow to it. And while that's a perfect example of it, no one ever brings up how much it affects 3D games as a whole. Playing Code Veronica on a CRT TV is incredibly atmospheric. The TV itself creates a vignette and bloom effect with high contrast and saturation modern flat TVs can't. Even after messing with settings on my TV, it still comes off more washed out and oddly sharp. Dumping the game into PSNow and configuring the shader just right, not only do I get the exact same feel but have it at 1080p with a widescreen patch while still keeping all that atmosphere, contrast, saturation, even smoothing out dithering, simulating greatly the bleed effect of CRT TVs. Officially on PS4, you don't get anything. Even something simple and colorful like Ape Escape and Parappa the Rapper 2 is completely transformed by these effects. Another problem is that the Dualshock 4 isn't up to the task for PS2 games. Both games available on the PSN and games emulated on PC, the controller's analog triggers are a great hindrance, and its D-pad and joysticks are inferior. A lot of games relied on R2 for important actions, like blocking and even jumping. Ape Escape 2 can be tough to do some jumps because of the heavy delay in the triggers. Lament of Innocence's block timing is even more precise, which is a problem as the later battles require you to perfectly time your blocks, which is really hard when it takes so long to take effect. And the R1 button for this function is a lot more uncomfortable than the back buttons, where your fingers are naturally resting on in this controller. Even with the S4 Windows disabling the analog and having it activate as soon as it goes down at all, it still falls short and requires me to push the trigger as fast as I can to avoid having that problem. With a PS2 controller, it feels right. Not only I don't have any problem with the back buttons, the joysticks are better. They're not only lighter, but their mushroom head shape is a lot more comfortable and better to play with than these plates current joysticks use. The D-pad is another important point. Mine isn't exactly the best quality and requires more force on the right D-pad, but it generally feels better. It feels like one big smooth wheel that transitions well, much like the Mega Drive controller or 360. For a game like Resident Evil, that kind of flexibility is needed. It matches up to a keyboard and how reliable it is to have your fingers on all three directions for tank controls. While the DS4 feels like keyboard keys, all separate that you can't transition well from one another without it feeling stuttery. The touchpad being reserved for both select and start is a great idea, and after playing hours of these games, I found myself trying to use them in modern games. The emulator itself isn't bad, however. It gets the job done. It sounds as good as the original hardware. After 3 years of playing PS2 games on the PS4, I haven't seen a single emulation glitch. It's easy and quick to use. Just buy the game and play it. You can check out the manuals without having to dig through archives. They kept the PS2 logo on startup, which is very charming. It does enough to be enjoyable if you don't care about the controller or the visuals. The availability, however, is impossible to ignore. The PS1 and PS2 are the most influential consoles for modern 3D games, and some of the best games in history are in those consoles. These are the only 3 PS2 games I own on the PS4, and it might seem like I should buy more before talking about the service, but they barely have any games available. In the store there are only a handful of games, most of which aren't even most popular games of those consoles. Some of them I understand is not up to Sony, like Silent Hill, But games like God of War, the Ape Escape games, and Ratchet & Clank aren't there. God of War is the most influential game from the PS2. It set the bar for violence in modern video games and it showed what the PlayStation could offer. It was the holy son of hack and slashes, and yet, it's absent. With all the new God of War games, those games would sell a hell of a lot. Ratchet & Clank was the love child that redefined exploration games for the PS2, and not even a crumb of it is available on the PS4. Ape Escape 2 is the only one available from a trilogy. The third game, which added great mechanics and had a lot of charm, and the first game, which is even more nostalgic and revolutionized the usage of dual analog, are absent. Wild Arms, an incredible RPG series set in the Old West, is absent. They barely have any games available, and the ones they do have aren't the best the platforms have to offer. And to add salt to injury, you can barely find these games in the PS4 anymore. Both on the website and in the console, they removed the PS2 section. The only way to find those games now is by specifically looking for them. I'm aware that the PS3 has way more PS2 games in store, but none of that matters, as the PS3 is also a retro console now that's been off the market for a few years. Not only do we need emulation for PS1 and PS2, we need PS3 emulation. Many PS3 games have been getting remasters, and that's great, but a lot of them aren't. Infamous, one of the best games it had to offer, is nowhere to be seen. The Ratchet & Clank Time Trilogy hasn't even been touched. PlayStation fans seem to not care because the remakes are good. But it doesn't matter how good they are. These games deserve to be preserved with as much care as they give remakes. Most of you must be already writing your massive comment about how everything I just said is invalid and wrong because PSNow exists. I'm sorry, but PSNow does not fix this situation for Sony. It doesn't even matter what games they have available. Even if it was every game ever released across those three consoles. It's only available in a very small list of countries. I understand I'm a filthy third world country kid and not having such service available here is to be expected. Switch blocked the eShop here until last year, but PSNow is not even available for all first world countries. Reportedly, Sony has been working on a new service, merging PS Plus and PSNow, offering a 3-tier system with PS1 and PS2 games available at the highest tier. I see on Twitter PlayStation mega chats talk about how Game Pass has finally met its end and that Sony will destroy scrubby Microsoft. Judging from the current available emulation on their service along with quality PSNow, it would be another lackluster service. Say what you will about Game Pass and Xbox, but I can pay a few bucks monthly to replay nearly all the games from 360. Fable 2 and 3 will be lost of time if not for that. It isn't fair to hate Nintendo the way people have because of their horrible preservation of games without also treating Sony the same way. If Nintendo must be burned on the stake for not preserving Earthbound, then so must Sony for not preserving God of War. Apparently PS4 doesn't have backwards compatibility because of a software difference, and while I believe it isn't as easy as putting the disc in and it work, I don't doubt Sony could make it work. Their games are incredibly influential, and while I don't particularly enjoy most of the PS1 or analog genre, it's clear that people are starting to miss these games. Same way Metroid and other fans had developed their own games for years because Nintendo wouldn't deliver, PlayStation fans are starting to cope too. Square Enix has been doing it right. All Final Fantasy games from those consoles are fully playable not only on PS4 but PC. All the Kingdom Hearts games are readily available on every platform, using the Japan exclusive final mixes. Castlevania Symphony of the Night is fully playable on PS4, and Konami added enough customization to make it feel right on modern TVs. Xbox has nearly every 360 game available on the spot. If there's anything to learn from this video, it's to demand preservation of all games and consoles, not just Nintendo's. Unofficial emulation can only do so much, and in the case of the PS1, it took decades to become good. Sony doesn't have to try to be better than unofficial emulators, because in the case of PCSX2, I don't think they can be better, but they need to at least make their games available. Even if it's in a washed out and worse form than playing on the original hardware, at least let people be able to legally pay for these games and play them. Judging from the current ideals for the PS5, that doesn't seem to be the case. They already tried closing the PS3 store, they obviously don't care to keep these games alive, and knowing PlayStation fans, they'll keep praising Sony for their fancy controller vibrations. Video game history be damned.